Irrespective to any context or specific example we might insert, when we discuss the purpose of a conclusion or a closure, we want something that acts as a sufficient summary, right? We want to tie the story together. We want to bind the package of seemingly sundry items, or maybe ones that do follow in some sort of faithfulness to one another, and there's a shared interaction. We want something to bring it home. I think Nothing More on lyrics is quite a fitting conclusion to what we've seen explored with this Convinced EP. And I'm not surprised, again, that this has such strength, just humoring, again, the narrative side, not having any inkling to the track we're about to experience that together. But this is the fulfillment to the Convinced EP. We're on the 5th song now, the wrap-up to what has been such an adept release, as strong as Silverline was. Many of you know, and in fact, some of you inquired if I would replicate the process for Convinced. How could I not? And I'm glad I did. I was already planning to, admittedly. I'm like, how could I not do that for Convinced if I did it for Silverline? Admittedly faster, because this one came out of, like Silverline out of nowhere. I'm like, wait, there's a new EP now? And yet here we are. 5 tracks later, we're on the conclusion. And the 4 preceding works, with credit to Lacerate, Decoder, Banshee, and Animals, have all been wonderful pieces. The last one especially was so ambitious for them. I'm curious, though, to see the wrap-up conclusion here. And Convinced has been, in some ways, very fresh to ANBERLIN, much like Silverline, and then in other ways deeply faithful. Mainstream in sound to some credits, like Decoder and Lacerate, they definitely have that strong ANBERLIN root, though Banshee and Animals is particularly fresh. Although, again, even that has a mainstream flair. These EPs are quite fun to explore, especially just to dissect, to extract the different elements, again, the specific ANBERLIN signature, meshed with new trials and ambition in music and on vision. Even on narrative, it is central, right? There's a exploration here, as I've said, right? I'm not operating on a band disclosure. I've just gone on past experiences of what I've humored and considering the 4 previous works. I have said there's a central theme for me manifesting around an exploration of relationships gone wrong, whether it be toxic relationships, relationships in chaos and conflict, communication breakdowns, and every piece here for me, in terms of a universal presence with this album, each piece has established quite a good bridge between mood of music and strength of narrative on pathos appeal. There's a deep connection here it's manifesting. It's been wonderful to entertain, and just to experience this album EP with you has been a fun ride. Let's witness, though, Nothing More together for the first time. And this piece already is promising, again, not just on lyrics. It's written very well, and with a real creative imagination and illustration. You'll witness that in a second if you're not exposed. On tune, though, this is going to be fresh, though it's the longest of the EP, at nearly 8 minutes. This is a long piece. So, fitting for a closure experience, for sure. I'm going to go ahead and cue it up. We can be introduced to it together for ourselves and experience it mutually. Of course, the song will commence in a minute, with lyrics provided, as many of you know, in terms of the video. I try and accommodate listener tastes. If you want to read along with the narrative for yourself, that will be provided to you. All right. Nothing More. Let's start this thing. It's a long wind, but let's experience it, and let's see how sufficient it is of a wrap-up to Convinced and the dream of what ANBERLIN is trying to evoke, at least on theme, potentially. Although, again, this has broad appeal from song to song. There is a central theme, at least, that I'm noticing. And it's one they're quite adept in and experienced in, given their past work in terms of relationship surveys. Okay, I like the synth introduction. And they picked a fun key choice. Good beat. Bit of a mix between that softer and faster pacing, so it's placed well on the album. Isn't that a beautiful line? There's a lot of repetition in this song, too. It's quite soft. I've, again, read in advance of what you're going to be hearing in the lyrics. So there's an even pace. It grounds you. has a tactile feel that's particularly interesting. But again, the way it's written, it has a... maybe it's not the best word to use to describe it. It's got a bit of like a sensual flair to it. I mean that in a pure sense. It's a song that touches you. I just think the synth application is particularly interesting for a song that is central in romance. Not something I often see. I like the variety of the vocal delivery. The background flair there is nice. It works well, especially for the electronic vibe. That's a nice, soft approach. I'm just really curious to see why this is so long and how they're going to make it work. Because we're already on the last chorus, at least according to the lyric page I'm looking at. So what are we in for? Nice linger. It's just gonna be like one giant instrumental synth medley. Let's see. It's an interesting choice. Continues that steady beat again. I like that softer approach. It's right in that middle space. It does feel like a closure song. It is sufficient for that respect. Sounds like a saxophone to me. Maybe I have that credit wrong. Again, I'm a musical connoisseur. I'm not a musician by trade. Just thinking of familiar sounds. And again, this is continuing that retro feel. Especially on older songs, there is a rewind to this. To earlier periods like music classics, for sure. Maybe like an older style jazz song to some degree too, or jazz and blues. It's an interesting layer to add on, especially to the rock credit. Okay, it drifts out. I wonder if this song will get the eventual music video presence. I could see that happening, much like Circles on Silverline. As I'm hearing running water, I'm already getting a cinematic illustration in my mind. The graceful ending, though. Okay, let's see where this goes. If you're trying to evoke a peaceful mood, you succeeded. Like, we've taken the agitation and the tragedy of previous songs and we've given a hopeful end. settings are kind of mixing in my mind. I'm seeing like a neighborhood, suburb, walkway, beachfront perhaps. At least that's what it's transitioning to. Again, I'm getting this natural influence of a serenity. What an interesting choice for the closure track. That is fascinating. You know, in the past when we've consulted longer work together, it's been a drawn-out tune. Usually with more vocal presence. It feels more like a traditional song, so this takes on a particularly unique flair. I mean, we talked about Ambition with ANBERLIN, and that's different. That's a bit adventurous, isn't it? That wasn't like Silverline. Silverline didn't have that type of closure effect. That's interesting. It's a real mix of mood. As a conclusion, I think it works. Again, this has a more hopeful vision. And as I said, maybe, again, I say sensual from a pure perspective, not necessarily something indecent. Something that has a tangibility factor, but has a bit of a romanced presence, right? I read the lines like, I can read your lips, those marigold eyes. Didn't that stick out to anybody? Like, that image is just so potent and relatable. I mean, we have marigolds around us, depending on where we live, maybe every single day. We have some at the house. So it's like, you see that type of image and you're like, that's quite beautiful. And then you pair that into like a romantic analogy and you're like, oh yeah, that's completely sentimental. There's nothing more to say. And again, there's a lot of repetition to this song. Like, there's nothing more to say. There's nothing more to do to make me love you. It feels, again, like a good wrap-up to what we've explored on the album, which is sort of, again, a relationship in, at least in my mind, a period of disillusionment, right? For whatever reason. Toxic relationship dynamics, breakdown of communication, life's tragedies. I'm trying to think how maybe I would sum up Animals, too. Just the chaos that life can bring, perhaps even just in the midst of a relationship where that harmony is broken. This piece shifts that. Like I've said, again, and I didn't say this to the credit of Animals, though maybe I should change my mind a bit, especially now seeing Nothing More. There's this steady flow with this EP in terms of navigation on theme and storyline that I find quite enamoring. It's just, this piece is so different from other ones, at least, especially, what we talk about subverting expectations, usually from a negative sense, but I've said in many cases in regards to music, it's been subversion done well. This, it's ambitious. I'm curious to see, again, if there's going to be a visualizer that releases. I think there's license to it because of the outro effect. Or maybe they were just trying to, again, establish a type of peaceful serenity on a departure feel, right? That we've entertained so many pieces of trial and challenge, and that disorder has been felt, right? This is the tie-in that'll shift the mood, that'll leave us on a happier note. And Running Water does that. At least in the way we imagine it. So it's a sufficient closer effect if that's what they were trying to drive at. I just find it really funny. Like, that's not what I was anticipating. I was thinking this would be a more stretched out tone, but to cut off at like around 5 to 4 minutes, I think it's like around 4:30. It was different. I think it worked. It's interesting as a closure. It really drops you out. On music, it's got a good mood. This definitely fits on pacing in a good middle space. It's much more on the soft side, very much like the remaining tracks we humored together on Silverline. This album, I think, has dipped a little more of a footing back into the original harsher rock ANBERLIN roots, which has been nice. Again, that's what brought me in, but I'm open to the ballad. Nothing More takes a song or an album that has that rock presence, and yes, it's still in the rock vein, yes, but it dips in like this blues classic flair, right? A jazz mood and part of some of the instrumental uses. This sentimentality of approach, it works sufficiently as a closure, again, to evoke that mood. And that's something I've said that's common to the entirety of the album, right? That bridge. Nothing More has it. It's a good summary piece. It's just, its ultimate navigation is so unexpected that still I'm trying to wrap my mind around it, because it's a bit of a surprise. But I think it works in terms of, again, evoking a specific feeling. Nothing more drives at that. I'd be curious to hear your opinion down below on that piece. I think it's good. But, music is a subjective experience, so I'd love to hear, if you do wish to disclose your perspective, your own independent thoughts. And whatever angle you approach, long-time listener, fresh listener, if this happens to be your first entrance to ANBERLIN, many of their songs are a bit shorter by comparison, but I would recommend looking into their back catalog and exploring Convinced, perhaps even with me. We took the deep dive together on this channel, much as we did in the same way with Silverline. I would also recommend that EP for you. I would recommend getting a better perspective from ANBERLIN, and you will thank me. I'm not looking for praise or adulation, but I'm just giving you a recommendation. I'm coming off of how many years I've been a fan of them. They deserve your eyes. If you want quality of work, especially in the rock space, and whether it be to the credit of just general good rock music or even Christian rock music as well, ANBERLIN has provided that routinely. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below on Nothing More. I think it's a good conclusion. Again, we talk about summaries, and I think Nothing More twists the mood in a sufficient direction, right? Something that's a little more positive to, again, change the overall negative effect that some of the other songs have placed us in by necessity, because that's what the storyline and the theming of the EP, at least in my interpretation, that's what it mandates. It takes some unexpected directions, but the mood of what it evokes, right, in terms of different types of genre flares mixed with, again, that softer pop rock edge with synth application too. That was particularly interesting to see, again, a song that has more of a romantic presence. I find it curious, but I think it's a blending that works to create something very interesting, and something that I do feel produces license for maybe an eventual visualizer. I could see that happening. Don't be surprised. And if that is the case, we will return to ANBERLIN, I'm sure, shortly. But, as I've said with Silverline, doors open for more. I didn't think it would come this quickly with Convinced, but I'm grateful it did. This has been a wonderful EP to experience with you. Again, I love the mutual experience that we can have in exploring good music, and ANBERLIN always satisfies me, and I hope they did for you too. So whenever more comes out, I'm game. I'm here, ready and waiting. And I'm grateful to have entertained Convinced with you. I'm sure the next compilation, whatever it'll be, EP, full album, whatever. I love seeing ANBERLIN coming back from their hiatus. Again, a familiar face to me over many years. I've loved the ride with them, and I'm loving this new adventurism I'm experiencing. I'm sure many of you are too. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.